Alrighty then. So, hi there. It's Chris from Airwindows, and we are doing another Monday stream if we can. I'm gonna see. The internet's gonna be a little weird today, I think. This is the first day of the big Reddit shutdown, and I'm actually a little teeny tiny part of that, because while I am also interested in a bunch of things going on Reddit and have subreddits that I am interested in and follow, I have also got one or two little bitty subreddits of my own, including our Airwindows. And so I have made those go private along with everybody else. I'm sure nobody's ever going to notice that, but doing my little thing there. And it's kind of interesting. I have my usual wall of weird computer stuff for coding things. I'm going to move the chat window over to where I can see it more readily. One of these days I'm going to figure out a good way to do that, where I can have a built-in chat that is more visible for streaming. But for the time being, I'm just going to do it the simple way of shuffling stuff around on the main computer. Big fat neck. Well, hi there. And yeah. So yesterday's plugin was not that big of a deal, I don't feel. It was pretty much nothing but a weird little noisemaker from the dawn of time. And there's nothing so wrong with that. I'm working on much bigger things, and I'm just trying to not be too frantic about it. I also checked an older video that was a live stream to find that yes, chat does show up once you wait long enough. If you don't wait long enough, you can't see chat, but give it a little bit of time and chat shows up. So that's good. It makes it slightly better of an experience, seeing as my studio, as grand and awesome as it is, does not involve me overlaying text on there, so I'm not like pumping chat into the... I suppose there might be a way to do it eventually, but I have not got good enough at all this to figure out how to do that. But you know, one of the things that I can do is kind of derp around for an hour or so. Maybe I'm not going to push for the full 2 hours, because I feel like you know, people watching kind of ticks down towards the end of that anyhow. It's the usual problem of I have more stamina for settling into a job of work than most people do. And this is fine, but if it's specifically about streaming and I'm not like on Twitch or something, where there's just people built in to... I mean, there's a thought. It's like if everybody got together and was like, oh, hey, let's go and take over Twitch and start making music there and build an audience of doing that. Well, that would be interesting. But at this moment, we're not doing anything of the sort. And I've got my little cup of coffee. Not the first one for today, but I'm going to try to not load up on ridiculous amounts of it. And I've got some things to do. I could do VST versions of Purist Console 3, which as we can remember from over here, I may or may not need to move the mouse pad over. Might be a good idea. I'll give it a try, because I don't need to be over here at the moment. don't need to get out my other mouse pad. It's funny with all of this stuff, the mouse pad should be useful for when I'm actually like composing and making music again, rather than just constantly making more plugins. And that card thing that I made from a while back, I still have the most recent version of that floating around. Like, see here, I'll show you. The card game that I was busy making has evolved to where we've got like notes to include. We've got the combination of colors, which you can't see because I'm doing my streaming lighting. For instance, this sad calm is a mood that you make through two different cards combining in a color coordinated way. And I have the names that I came up with for what the cards were for, like calm switching to happy and agitated. I called it the perky bridge, and so that's what it says. And we've also got time signature things. For instance, this is a 17, which is 881 off of this card, but you also have a choice of 44 at the bottom of the card. The tops are like more animated, and the bottom are like downshifts. And then we've got all of this going on, all of these options. And the final thing that I did with the cards was I went through and found, actually through Hacker News posted a thing about this. They had a thing where they were finding the best anagrams ever to exist in the English language. And the way they figured that out was by taking all of the anagrams and then their metric for what was best. And the neat thing about this is that this is just using regular words, and so anybody can use this information if they saw fit. Their notion of what a best anagram would be is largest number of letters moved from their original places. And they have very large and unusual words for the purpose of doing this. And I assigned an anagram to every card. Every card has its own funky anagram. So for instance, what I've got showing right here is the empty to either sad or happy. Empty switching to either unfolds into richness or darkness expands. And the name I gave to that one was semi-nomadic demoniacism. And that is an anagram that is written on the card and could serve, it's certainly not going to serve as a lyric, but it might be another little chunk of inspiring some kind of sound or music that you can run with. And I'll cut the deck to what is actually another empty. And this anagram is integrals triangles. They're anagrams. It's two words with exactly the same letters. I've got a angry section. It's actually the orange color associates with happy angry, which I'm thinking is kind of like rocking out, aggressive, upbeat music. And that one is associated with the anagram roomiest motorize. Motorized with an S. And it just goes like Aristotelian retaliations. That's a funky anagram. Crab hole bachelor. Now, crab hole is not a word I run across very often, but apparently it exists in this list, and so they made an anagram out of it. So there's a calm section, and it can switch into either a sadder, larger section with the transition tide comes in, or a calm switching into a crueler section with into the darkness. But the moment that this describes can be elicited by the anagram crab hole bachelor. And if you can think of music that goes along with that, then, off you go. Catechism's schematics. There's one. Creekfish kerchiefs is one of the calm ones. Well, that's a colorful anagram. And it's really just quite something. And, I've gone through here. Here is another empty section that switches into either engage serious mode or engage showing off. And this empty section, the anagram is unsortable neuroblast. Now, I can imagine trying to make music and being like, well, where do I even start? Well, here's a time signature. For instance, I have a choice of a 13 or a 4, and the 13 goes in 5/5/3, so it's 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3. And you can count it like that fairly easily. I've been working on getting the modular synth to be able to let me punch in funny time signatures like that if I want. And as usual, the way that kind of stuff works is you have to spend hours upon hours of tinkering with the things, at which point you're too tired to make any music with it. But it's building these machines that, like, for instance, when I got Welcome to Free Luna, the album Welcome to Free Luna, is based off of having the machinery from years of trying to do sort of live techno streams and switching that over into a sort of performance mode and sitting down on the regular and going like, okay, get a beat happening, get some chords happening, play some notes over those, like improvise or figure out something to do, go from there, and done. Put it aside, edit it together into a shorter piece later, and on with the next day. And that's how Welcome to Free Luna came out, which is not to say it's the greatest achievement in all of humanity, because obviously it's not, but it came out a relatively few days that weren't too overwhelming to do. In fact, it came out at a time when I was scrambling to travel, because this was back when I was traveling a little more than I do now. Anagrams. I have an angry section where the anagram is Predator's Teardrops. Now that's evocative. Tenderizing ingredients. Outshined, unhoisted. Here's a full section that the anagram is Happiest Peatship. Peat, like the Scottish earth that is a kind of organic stuff. Pre-rational proletarian, that's evocative. Angleworm lawmonger. Anagrams are quite wonderful. Sometimes it's like anagrams is, the anagrams never lie. You find the reality of a situation through finding the anagrams. And, measuring geraniums. Loathingly tally-hoing. That's weird, but awesome. Adrenotropic Incorporated. See, I just feel that these could lend themselves to being inspirational, motivational cards, much in the sense of, Eno's oblique strategies, where the idea is you draw a card and it inspires you to make a musical choice, and then you're off and rolling again and have a series of next decisions to make. Whereas in this light, I was thinking of it in terms of being able to just make up a card game and be able to use it for my own stuff. It's a weird sort of offshoot off of what people are trying to do with AI art. Because that's the thing, is these days people are trying to do this stuff with AI art, and it's largely about coming up with some relatively uninteresting prompt and having it spout out stuff that is sort of mass media friendly. I'm not sure if I could really call it that, but AI stuff in general And I've been in the process of downloading Facebook's Llama, which also means I'll have the raw materials. Yeah, it kind of was. It kind of was an inspiration of Bleak Strategies. The thing about downloading all of Llama, and I've gotten up to the first 3 ones, and it's going to take me another week or so to download the 65B. I consider it worth dedicating the space to storing that and fooling with it. But if you have that, that's what other AI trained things are based off of. Llama is like a form of raw material from which you can make other AI things. But people usually use them simply to do something very generic or something that is unreasonable, like answer questions like a wise person, which it's not. It's like an autocomplete, but it's an autocomplete with practically the entire range of human experience and opinion. But rather than building that all into a model, it's boiling it down into a set of assumptions, and that's what makes the whole thing kind of interesting. Especially for me, because what I do for work is very much against that. What I do for work is not something that can be replicated by any large image or word or concept model that bases itself off of gathering together the knowledge and wisdom of humanity and being able to generate a set of neurons, linking that together so that you can spit out potentially what people would most likely say. And that's why AI runs into problems with being horrible. AI can often be horrible no matter what perspective you're looking at, because it will come up with something that represents large numbers of people that you don't like or that you think are full of it. And it really doesn't matter what group you're talking about. Whatever group you're talking about, it's still going to be able to offend somebody. You know, whether it's like, oh no, the AI is insufferably racist and monstrous, or the AI is insufferably woke and wants to propagandize us, or whatever. It's always going to be doing stuff like that because it is this it's like humanity's brains in a blender. And once you've done that, you can't really fine-tune the thing, so it's all a matter of trying to tell it what you expect. But the interesting part is the intensity with which the AI is able to, the access that it has to all of those neurons. It's much like the way that I am exploring the stable diffusion stuff and the AI art stuff. And this is a wonderful, I'm going to need to try this. I'm actually quite excited to. Hey, Tacky Bunker. I see no reason why you couldn't do, say, stable diffusion and get heavily into asking it to do, say, an album cover. And general concepts like, I would like a light and airy feel, or I'd like it to be dark and ominous. And then throwing stuff like these cards with the anagrams. And you don't need the cards to get the anagrams. You can just look those up. But, and I see your question. I'll get to it in a moment. And then you tell the stable diffusion to generate a whole bunch of stuff based on the concept of seabird sidebar, that being one of the anagrams. Serrated retreads is likely to do just pictures of tires. But there's going to be stuff where it doesn't really correlate to anything. And ideally, you want to be able to activate neurons rather than just throwing bunches of letters that it doesn't register anything from. But you want to activate weirdly separated batches of neurons. Serpentinous supertension. Supertension in particular is likely to connect to neurons, but not in a very visual way. That's more of an abstract concept. Here's measuring geraniums again. there is a happy empty musical groove under the name of neotropical percolation. That could be interesting. See what it spits out for there. Semilunar unrealism. Well, Stable Diffusion is very good at unrealism. And it's like that. Oh, Taki, you had a question, so let me jump on that. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on concurrent viewers, and so when people get tired, we can end. But it's arguably more important for me to chat with chat while doing the live streams. The being able to do coding is nice, and if anybody wants to see me doing that, I can fit it in there, but I'll be doing that all week long, at my convenience. So would it be possible to have an update of SoftGate where you can control the... Well, that's an interesting suggestion. You're basically asking for an envelope follower. You're asking for a Mutron. Well, it wouldn't be possible to have it be a update of SoftGate exactly because it simply doesn't have the right kinds of filters for doing that. But the fact that it's a gate gives it the envelope following functionality. So basically, you're asking for, give me an envelope filter. I do wonder whether maybe there are other things that can give you that. For instance, I would dig into the Surge soft synth simply because it is so flexible and does so many things. Surge is kind of a happy place for me these days, not because I know of anything new they've added of mine. I'd love to see more of that, but it's not really up to me. But because Bacon Paul from the Surge environment did the VCP rack port of my Airwindows catalog, everything, and has continued onwards to set it up as a set of GitHub actions, doing a thing that he knows how to do from Surge and that I don't know how to do, where I just update the code and then go to the right page on GitHub, and I have been given permission to run the action. And I update the code, I upload it so that the code base is the way it needs to be, with all of the additional things like Airwindowpedia and so on updated to cover for this. And then I go and push the one button, and it generates the daily for the rack thing. So I now have control over when to output a new rack plugin from the code base that I personally maintain. And none of it is in the area that I understand, but I'm absolutely able to trigger it and operate it. And so that means he doesn't have to deal with that. I can just sort of keep it going. And he's like, yeah, ask tell me every month or so, and I'll put out an official release of the thing. And the next, if you're interested in that, my recommendation would be, try an envelope follower to control the plugin, and then try, for instance, the Z filters. In particular, Z2 or the Y filters. I think X filters have X2. And those are biquads, but they are set up in such a way that they're a more colorful filter sound, and in some cases they have a really striking tonality to them. And so you'll have some options of the kinds of resonance you might want. Yeah, that's what I would be thinking. And that's exactly what you'd be looking for. Now, if you wanted something that was a little smoother, one of the biquads might work, bearing in mind that for smoothness and fluidity, you're probably going to want to look at the Z series filters, where I intentionally set them up so that you could modulate them better. And thank you, because this is what the stream is for. Anytime anybody can show up and ask me something. Similarly to all the talk about AI, I'm the person who has the Airwindows code base sitting around in my head for the most part, and how all of this stuff works and fits together. So you should be able to come and ask me. It's the most important thing I do on streaming day. More important than, for instance, running off a variation on FATIQ, which I think I'm going to need to do. That because the plugin FATIQ, much like how I've got verb tests and verb fors, is not really intended to be a standalone effect so much as it is the test bed for me building the new set of console plugins. And while I've got Appearance Console 3 coming out, I was in the middle of looking at that to remind myself what was actually different about it. And I bet I know what I was doing with that. I'm pretty sure that the Purist Console 3 is me doing the crude sign calculation rather than simply using the math library sign. And in particular, this is the crude sign calculation, which is using the method of approximation that people use for this, but it has been altered so that all of the divides there are done exclusively using bit shifting. And as you know, I can't say the name of that plugin, but a lot of stuff is riding on the back of the shifting of bits. And all of Console 0 was sort of a big wake-up call as far as what I could get out of overkill in that direction. And then it becomes a matter of, doing that, and also fitting it in other places, such as this, where the logical thing would be to use the correct values for dividing and assigning these numbers. But instead, doing it in such a way that when I've got these input sample arrays to these various powers, and then the divide is strictly a shifting of bits. It's funny about all of that because it's like another taste of dealing with the future as it involves AI and interacting with these enormous machines made out of code and other people's computers. Because that's not going away. Having to deal with computers and having to deal with AIs is not going away. I was just in Pennsylvania visiting my sister. It was a little ways after my birthday, and it was something that I like to do maybe once a year, so we'll see how that goes. And she's kind of the only member of my family that I'm really spending time with these days, which is fine with me. But, and in fact, it was interesting because I also made some strides at listening to what was going on in her life, because apparently me and my two brothers have a tendency of just bullheadedly charging on and wanting to talk about the stuff that we do, whether it is, whatever I'm going on with, or actually it's hard to say what one of my brothers would be going on about, but then the other one would be going on about his Magic the Gathering League or whatever. And she is a college professor, a psychology professor, and has a lot of interesting things to talk about, and being a college professor has a lot of college politics that affect her life in a very powerful way. And so there's a lot to talk about, but she's had a tendency of not opening up about it because she knows that the brothers need to run their mouths, and she has to, And so I was like, no, what you're talking about is interesting as well. And I'm beginning to learn that what I do as a job and with my life is so arcane that the only thing I can do is produce final results and show them to people, because nobody can really keep up when I'm filling in like this AI thing and this code thing and this sound engineering thing. Like, I can see what the combined power of everything is pushing towards, but nobody else can, and it just becomes incredibly boring. Hey, BTM. I can see some of the chat. Also, in the long run, your chat will be showed on the page, although it only shows up if you go to the live section of the YouTube Airwindows, but it does show up for that. So, I have a question for you, Mel. You say, I've listened 3 times and still doubting if I got you right. What are you doubting? This is a good time to ask. And Robert Kennedy, I mentioned rack ports. I do believe that CHMAHA, I didn't know the name, but I know that somebody has been porting some of my stuff to JSFXs. Cool with me. That's why it's open source. It is MIT license, which means you can also do GPL with it. Apparently, I don't even need to. Hey, Lorenzo. Hey, Jazz. Apparently, you don't even need to dual license stuff. Like, MIT is automatically friendly to doing GPLs with it. And yeah, I am enthusiastic with that on the grounds of I like people being able to work with these things. I'm not sure it necessarily runs more efficiently than like bare metal hard-coded VSTs and AUs. In particular, I like the VSTs because I get to run them in double precision throughout, and I find that to be as important as running at 96K. But any variation that anybody makes that is useful to them is fine with me. Okay, we can have a conversation about what Lorenzo has just mentioned. Because here's the thing, is I have been doing music captures like crazy. I've got a lot stashed away in little folders on my desktop as far as what would be particular sounds. If I'm careful, I can probably play snippets of it. I could probably play snippets of almost anything for really quick bursts, but I'm pretty sure I can play snippets of the stuff that people can normally react to. And so I'm just trying to keep track of what the actual chat questions are. Let me shrink this big old window down. I've already got a neat folder. That's some of the stuff that I've been capturing. And there's bits of there. For instance, I can play you a bit of this, but you won't be able to recognize it because I'll pick a part that doesn't have actively music playing in it. But I can, well, I've got to hang on for a second. I got my whole setup moved around so that I can book back and forth between optical inputs. And in fact, I can even drag the optical output over to the newer laptop. Excuse me. Yeah. I could play a little snippet of this. But I can't play anymore because that is off a Starless and Bible Black. And Robert Fripp would be mad at me if I tried to play it. Never mind that technically I can't play it because he's also really good at hunting down people who do. I'm certain that nobody is going to spot like this, because that's just Vinyl Crackle. It's one of my scratchier records. But yeah, that's a Neve record. All of the super early Crimson stuff is also early Neve. So is Yes. So is a bunch of other things. You know, as far as little blips of stuff, here is something that you'd recognize. Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. And what I can do is study all of these things. You know, like here's... And this is very much old record vinyl sonics through a tube audiophile preamp captured through API pre's, and it's going to be the Motu that I'm capturing. I'm not capturing through the ultra hi-fi ADC, but all things considered, it's good enough to work with. And there's some stuff where people react to them and play the entire track and don't get in trouble. So doing a little stream like this, and it's limited. What I've got here is you're hearing the monitor speakers and my subs. So you're not getting a really good picture of what I have here to hear, but I've been capturing all these records. And if we're talking about Neve, Precious. A little scratchy, a little crunchy.
Shouldn't let your manners slip here too.
And that guitar tone is an old MXR flanger. I've got a flanger like that. And you can really hear the difference between these and what you got off of like CD versions where everything's hyped up a lot. I have a way of capturing this where, particularly if I'm sitting in the right position and can hear properly, I'm getting a really good picture of what things like supersonic frequencies are really doing in this old stuff. Remembering, of course, that with classic records, there were quad formats that operated on supersonic carrier tones. You had to be able to encode amplitude modulated music into 30 kilohertz tones. And they made that stuff work. Records can handle it, especially back in the day before, when you were stuck mixing onto like the earliest digital, which cut you right down to 25K or so. And you obviously couldn't do those carrier tones at all then. But yeah. So let me keep an eye on chat and make sure that I'm understanding what people are saying. Yeah, as far as Neve fatness is concerned, it's interesting because what I'm finding is not so much that Neve is all very fat. Like, for instance, I'll bounce back and forth between a couple of things without playing too much of them. Here's a good one. And what else can I use here? Oh, here's another good call. So I have here the captures of Amagama and Metal. Both are decent quality. Actually, Amagama was kind of crackly. Metal is, I believe, an Australian pressing, and it's nice and early. And we've just got a lot going on here. And Amagama is the TG12345 console. This is the one where I usually, there's a whole bunch out there which I have captured. For instance, I have Abbey, well, I'll prove it. If I'm quick enough, I can absolutely do a little burst of one of these. For instance, the end of, let's see, the Lennon thing ending outside one. What the hell was it? She's So Heavy. Abbey Road. Again. And nothing's going to bust me for 2 seconds a clip, because that is self-evidently, you can't even recognize it from anything that short. It would be fascinating to find out that they did. That would be crazy. We'll see. But these ones where they don't nuke you off the internet immediately for playing bits of it, this is also TG12345. So you listen to the subs. Let's turn it up some tone. It's louder. Kick drum. And by the same token, the famous Dark Side of the Moon. I have the audiophile pressing of this. Sadly, it is not as pristine as I might like. That's the Pink Floyd Heartbeat. And that is a drum beater being pushed into a giant parade drum. And that's the TG1234. Obviously, this is a very bassy console. If you're looking for fat, this is probably going to be the one. This old EMI console. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to find a snippet out of my us and them off of this record. Actually has a skip in it, which is sad, but it is very, very heavy in fat. And that's money. Here's us at that. And you heard what that kick drum was doing? The big... That is using the board EQ to just exaggerate stuff like crazy. They were not shy about that. The Beatles were first to do that. Just start cranking the knobs like mad. And this console gave you enough controls to be doing stuff with it. And again, here is Ummagumma coming back into its loud part. Great moment. Gotta love Nick Mason's drum playing because it is so much like mine. Some drummers have time. For instance, Ginger Baker had time and only liked to work with other people who had time, meaning that they could hear like a computer, and the sense of time that they had was incredibly tight and rigid. And so you'd listen to Old Cream, in which every single person in the band had time, and they could do a pause and then come back in, and it would be like a digital edit, just boom. And Nick simply does not have time in that sense. Neither do I. I don't. But by the same definition, it's like, well, you can't actually make the time sense flow as evenly as somebody that has time, but you can reshape the groove or swing it around or something like Nick's like whoom, and make a big shape in sound. And that's also cool, and it's been very popular. And so there you go. And that is, again, the TG1234, which I think is the low end on this has its own character going on. Bear in mind, this is I think it's still this is like a 1970 record. This does not have, for instance, the weight of a more modern one. But then you've also got metal from 71, and this is a Neve, rather than those which were all EMI. They're all thicker, fatter. There's just more texture in them. This is a pillow quince. This is not as fat. This has a particular kind of character, a particular kind of texture to it. There's a lot of highs. There's a lot of highs. There's a lot of, because at the time that this was happening, Neve was always really interested in like going more transformerless, and they were working with the first transistors. Rupert Neve was known for doing the first transistor desks, I think probably anywhere, certainly in England. And you didn't have silicon transistors, so this early stuff, a lot of it is literally germanium transistors, like old fuzz phases. And it's also transistors, not tubes. If you're thinking tube fat, that's not this. This is why Console Zero ended up reminding me of Neve, which was completely unexpected. It's because Console Zero throws extra harmonics and is not as tubey, is not as rounded as tubey type stuff is. And so here's another one. Saint-Tropez. Listen to the weight of that kick drum. That's very big. That's a lot of low frequency extension. That doesn't mean it is as fat as, say, let's load up Dark Side and this is more fat. This is the EMI, and it's a lot softer. Feel that kick. And you contrast that. I'm probably going to be able to do more of this as I capture more of the records, especially since I am so evidently showing little snippets of stuff and trying to highlight it. It's the first for this, and that's pretty cool. Compare that to, for instance, the Saint-Tropez. That's very clear. Or another one of my faves, you can go to another group where they kind of let you play it on YouTube. Yes. And you compare that with the Saint-Tropez. It's much more chill, but listen to the presence of that vocal. And you bounce back over to Fragile and listen to the presence and immediacy of that transistorized vocal. And that bass. And that's the sound, really. But if you listen to what the highs are doing, which you can't because this isn't a DI, at least at this time, this is not a DI. But the highs are going way out there, but they're not coming forward in the way that we're used to. Like you listen to the high percussion in here. The cymbals. And then the snare. And of course, the keyboards and things like that, the way that organ pokes out. There's a real sonority to it across the whole frequency range, but it's definitely not about fatness. There's a sort of pungency coming off of that early Neve stuff. Again, transistor and very possibly germanium transistor. And then you compare it to stuff like Dark Side. Let's see, what else would be good? Time. So there's kind of less of a pungency off of that one than off of the Neve. It's not nailing you with these sonorities and the edges of the sounds nearly as hard. It is wide range, and it does have a kind of fatness, but the extension, the aggression of stuff like the highs and how hard the bass hits is not as much off of the EMI console. And this is why Jeff Emmerich had problems with it when he was going from all the other Beatles albums to the Abbey Road. He was like, I can't get my sound. I can't get the sound. Let me have a look at my, hey Monster. Monster is stopping by to say hi. And backwards, fair enough, by all means. Console 8 is not really about Heritage Audio 32C. That's just the closest analog comparison I had available. I demonstrated the full Console 8 against the Heritage Audio 32C, and it wasn't too far off, but I wouldn't really... None of these are really tailored in the way that I'm going to be doing it, because what I'm going to be doing when I dig into this properly is be putting out versions of console that have the correct EQ setups for each things. Because, you talk about totally new Pultec EQ. Why don't you talk about, for instance, the Helios or the MCI EQ or the Trident Day range? Because those are going to be within reach. And they're all based in the same basic technology. What you're asking for is inductor capacitor EQs. And one of the things that we know about those, like here, I was showing metal. I want to show you some of the bass stuff off of that. Here's the opening. It's a little crackly. But I've always loved the introduction to this. Next thing you will hear is the bass when it comes. And then, when the drums and things kick in, it is so heavily filtered you almost can't hear them. So here's bass. And I can do this with Holt. Hardly hear the kick. Here it's not playing. But when that section comes back, you have toms, you have the kick, but the processing on this, there's backwards reverb and everything, is so heavy that it completely masks what the drums sound like. You can hear them elsewhere, like on Saint-Tropez. This is Echoes, man. How do you not know this? Oh, I don't doubt it. It also kind of sounds like that, though. Yeah, this is Pink Floyd from 1971. This is Echoes. Get a load of this. That's the scale of this one. I'm going to stop it in a moment, but if you don't know that, go and find it. It is off of Pink Floyd's 1971 album Metal, and that's what the record was. It's a little grungy, it's a little dirty, but that also says a great deal about how you mix. Think about that for a second, what you heard. You heard how loud that bass was relative to everything else. It could be completely overwhelming, and that's what you had to do to get that particular sound. The scale of the sounds, the lows have to be bigger than the highs. Here, let me skip. If you don't know this, I will skip around a little bit. I have no intention of playing the entire thing as if this was a listening stream, because there's other people to do that. But then we'll continue the discussion about the various kinds of consoles, and then I'll call it a day. But we did this section, and then builds up. Heavy section going. But listen to how small those drums are. And then we bust into the other section. That's a completely different mix. And in fact, everything went full stereo on you. You're hearing over a mono mic, unfortunately, so you're not hearing any of that. And we got more jamming. It's like a sidelong jam. And I'm skipping past like 5 minutes of jam. There's some good Hammond organ stuff right here. You notice the energy rises and rises. Here. Notice how it's easing off into... And this is the scary section for people who are on acid to lose their minds and freak out. This is the middle of Echoes by Pink Floyd. That guitar noise, which is actually a wah pedal wired up backwards and plugged in wrong way around, and they were able to make that noise out of it, so it's like circuit bending in 1971. Here it comes again. Just when you feel safe from it coming back, here it comes again. Makes you jump. And then there's a lot of this, because that's what they would do, is they would, again, 1971 Medal. That is what this album is. I have treasured it all my life. It is a wonderful Pink Floyd album. And went through all that scary stuff and then gradually come out the other side to Rick Wright, making a nice chord so that things are safe. By the way, those noises were bass guitar into a Vincent Echo Rec. And they do a giant build into a recap of the original themes and then out in another special effect noise. So they got into this. It gets bigger and bigger. Now that's fat, even though it's Neve. Badass guitar sounds as well. And echoes, man. It's not even fair to be playing it to you over the speakers and then over the microphone. This is my Hangout stream. Maybe I'll just get another YouTube channel and repurpose that for playing music or something. But that is, well, among other things, that is Neve. And it does not give you the same sound as your TG or whatever. I've got other stuff, for instance, another little space in sound. It's close to the edge. Yes. And a lot of this stuff uses, the same EMI, same EMT plate reverbs and things. So the toolkit is already kind of there. Here's a loud pipe organ, but you can see on the screen the actual volume is not as loud as you'd think, because it's not taking up as much of the bass as you'd think. And then it comes from the pipe organ. Again, Neve pungent sonority. Mini Moog. Back into the band stuff. This is old record Neve. Listen to how much the high frequencies are not accentuating every little thing. Like that bass part. You know that Chris Squire's bass sound is very bright and trebly, right? Well, kinda no. It is a Rickenbacker through an amp sound. That is plainly obvious. It's a really aggressive sound, but when we're hearing it, we're not hearing the high frequency chitter, chitter, chitter on just about anything. Even things like cymbals and tambourines and stuff are sitting in their proper place. Nothing is coming forward and being focused. What can I show you that is more like things coming forward and being focused? I'm going to dig into my SSL category because that contains stuff that I can probably play bits of. But this is a SSL that was mixed into digital. Hear the high brights? And this is still a vinyl record, mind you. But that is SSL into digital. So you can hear those S's and things. You can hear how all of the sounds have highs welded to them. There's a kind of overtone to everything. Whereas if you go back to 1972 off a Neve, completely different feel. And there's highs. There are highs there. The highs are about 10 foot back. There's highs on that organ. And you get used to a sound like that, and then you bounce over to, well, maybe not that. The highs off of SSL and digital are completely different, even when heard off of a vinyl. Here's a classic. Now that's good bass. This is all sort of like invented drums. It's not actually drum kit in the normal sense. But you hear the highs coming off of that. And how clearly everything has like the high register as part of the sound showing up in there. Sounds like it's coming off of a radio already. Whereas this, in the same context, that sounds like it's in the room with you. And it's kind of darker, it's kind of muddier. But it's not really muddy because those mid-range frequencies are searing. They're ripping right through. Whereas you go back to the more modern take, and I'm not even playing something like off of radio or whatever. I'm not even playing something off of Spotify. This is literally all off of, this is still off of vintage records. Even the Police record is a vintage record being played back off of a tube preamplifier. Even this is miles away from what the CD or streaming version will sound like. It's got more extended lows. The highs still sit better. The highs of, like, listen to how faint that hat is. You're not going to hear that off of Spotify. It's not going to be like that. I'm really going to have to set up the system where I can run it through, because yeah, it's just too far away, you know. Here's Tina Sahara. Here is Stuart Copeland with his famous cymbals. But listen to how loud the cymbals are relative to the rest of the song. That's not anything like how you hear it these days. It's serious. I don't think I have anything like that kicking around. Yeah, all I've got that has been captured is literally the records in their best forms. So I don't have anything where I can really play off of the same speakers you're hearing now. An example of what it's like off of a maybe I can come up with something. I mean, we're monitoring off of this computer, so technically it should be possible. There's my first Helios track, Desperado by the Eagles. I am not going to get to play the Eagles on streams any more than I'm going to get to play the Beatles. But there's other stuff where you can. For instance, I wonder what might... This is Ziggy Stardust. Let's find something that has hats. See, the interesting thing is now we've bounced over to the Trident A range. That's a 4-band EQ, and this is one of the first albums that really started exploiting that. So what we're hearing is sounds that are reminiscent of what we were hearing off of Synchronicity. He's mixing all of this stuff to really sit in various frequency ranges and was one of the first to do it. Maybe what I should do instead is bounce back to the... I've also got a nice little MCI section. That's going to be interesting. You know what came off of MCI? One of These Nights, Hotel California, The Long Run, Pink Floyd's Animals, Pink Floyd's Obscured by Clouds, and Joe Walsh's The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get. A bunch of stuff came off of MCI consoles. It sounded amazing. But what I can probably play some of is... Let's do a quick little A-B using, let's see, that's the wrong mouse. And just briefly open up this so that I can, hopefully this will still work. And long distance runaround is probably going to be a fairly decent way of doing this, because see, one of the things about this is, yes, got remixed by Steven Wilson, and people are usually hearing it off of stuff like Spotify. So when we hear this, like here, I'll use this guy. This is JP. I like JP. I listen to his reaction stuff quite a bit.
Oh, almost forgot my hat.
But I'm pretty sure that he has been, this is 2 years ago, I think he has had a tendency of listening to stuff off of Spotify, and he's getting all of the remixes. So I'll find a suitable spot. Listen to how different this is. And I'm going to have to turn it down because also loudness war. And that's, let's see. Got it lined up. So, listen and learn. I don't think the Joe Walsh was done in the olive and finished underneath, because I'm pretty sure that Joe Walsh was a Criterion Studios one from down in Florida. I've been spending weeks like hunting down the info on all of these, which is not to say that I got it all right, but I put in a great deal of effort trying to get it all right. So here is how you hear long distance runaround now. Hear that cymbal? Hear that hat? completely different presentation. Everybody's a little farther back. It's like the instruments are on the stage back there. Also note the volume difference, of course. Maybe I can literally play that same part. Okay, so direct immediate A-B. Here is the modern version that's been remixed by Steven Wilson to sound right and observed off of probably Spotify. And you hear how it like sits in the reverb and stuff. Same thing. Did you feel the kick drum in there? And then again. Let's go to that little bit as well. Here is the way that it bursts into the faster bit. You can kind of hear the kick drum. That hat again. Whereas same thing. Doesn't that sound warmer? But can't you still hear the air on the cymbals? And there's a thing about the way that the harmonies hit where in the modernized version, it's just tearing your face off with treble. Whereas in the classic version, the version that was off of an analog Neve and an analog record and not remastered and hyped and remixed and boosted to within an inch of it, well, beyond an inch of its life because it's dead as a doornail. The harmonies and the way they hit. So that's a lot of highs, right? But in the version of the actual record, oh, I have inadvertently selected a tiny piece of section that I am now looping, so let's not loop it. That wasn't a skip, that was a loop. It's kind of like it's the same volume off of the much brighter one, but rather than being the same volume because it's all brightened and sharpened up, it's like it's the same volume because the intensity of the tones are coming through with searing, powerful force. Let's jump away from that so that I can see my screen again. And I'm going to keep an eye on firstly, if they are sending warnings to me and being like, you're busted, you're playing music, which they're probably not going to do for this. But that is my whole point with this kind of stuff, is you can still do this. Because this is very attainable. These are recordings done in good quality, and they're not as twisted into a radio-friendly shape. The naturalness of these sounds is achievable today. It's not that hard. You could do stuff that was kind of like this on a frickin' Behringer. You could capture the sounds on a frickin' Behringer and get sort of into the zone. It's all about handling the mid-range correctly and not screwing everything up. And yeah. So what was I going over to? There was other stuff that I was showing. I do have a bit of an example of the classic EMI console, the Red, because much like with Abbey Road, I can't actually, I can record, although they're very scratchy, Beatles records, but I certainly can't show them. However, Saucer Full of Secrets was also done at EMI, and Saucer Full of Secrets is the Pink Floyd record before they were able to do things like use the Abbey Road console. So the sound of this one, this is what Pink Floyd sounds like through the Beatles console. This is the old tube recording console. It's actually quieter, so I actually have to boost it a little bit. Maybe not that much. Remember a Day, this is. This would, I believe, be Syd Barrett playing this slide guitar solo. And all that resonance, that's on the record. That's the bass guitar with strings ringing along. This is the drums resonating. That little high note, that's the slide guitar. Let me play that again. Because that's the thing, is Remember a Day is like the last glimpse of Syd Barrett other than Jug Band Blues on the end of this record. And certain things that he was capable of doing, like that little high feedbacky note, that's not in key with the song, but as an experience, it's amazing. And part of that is when the recording supports it. So what you'll hear, listening to it again, is the Rick going, "Why can't we reach the sun? Why can't we float against the waves?" Or floating against the waves, something like that. And that resonant, that feedbacky note, that's Syd's Telecaster. And he had done so much acid by this point that his entire solo was kind of weird, but it fed back on that note, and he did not resist it. He allowed it to be like a minor second above what the high note's supposed to be, and it just kind of sears through in this way. And my purpose is to be able to make plug-in systems and DAW systems where you can get these kind of sonics to come out and resonate in the right way, like this. Listen to the high note. also that we still have bass. That thumping, that's Nick Mason's kick drum. It's the same sound that you hear on Dark Side of the Moon, etc. He's the same drummer, same drum kit. You don't hear every beat because this is like 1960s. They didn't set it up that way. Here's another one. A little bit of set the... This is great. Here's another Rickenbacker bass. This is Let There Be More Light. So when you're going earlier than the 70s consoles, part of what you're doing, if you're shooting for that, is resisting everything that you've learned out of, 1990s and beyond studio technology, and being like, okay, here's the bass, it's directly into the thing, it's all mid-rangey, that's what the sound is, we're going to keep that. And we put up a mic for the drums, and the drums sound like this far back, and it's all like mid-rangey thwacks, and there's no rumble on the kick drum, but there's a certain amount of punch to it. And we're going to hang on to all of those things. Back in the day, there was no choice. But you had like this old EMI tube console, and, pre-1970, they really didn't know any better. But all the same, it did sound awesome. They would be there in the studio and, okay, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this. Turn all the channels on and let's listen to what it all sounds like together. And they crank it way up. And they'd be like, wow, cool. Okay, this is good. Because they didn't know there was anything else you could do. Also notice the funny dark side-like thing. It's got a kind of swing to it. And the reason that swing is there is this is an old tube console with no special miking, and all the drums are mic'd like from off at a distance, right? But Nick Mason probably had his double kick kit. So what he's doing is he's using both feet and going thump, 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 thump with both feet at once just to make the sound that big. And then when they kick into the louder part, he goes, and then bashing away at that stuff, and the bass does not come up to balance it, but then when they fall back, you've got that low kick drum again. And it does not sound that it come way forward and it's going whoomph in your subwoofers, but the original sound, which is not being handled in any particularly special way, is going whoomph, whoomph, whoomph. And that's the accurate sound of it coming off of the instrument. Hear this sort of whoomph. Love the keyboards. That's the thing is, every time it comes back, Rick Wright's going back into the keyboards is cooler and cooler. Like, listen to this one. No, this is Pink Floyd. This is Pink Floyd. This is Pink Floyd's Saucer Full of Secrets. Go forth and find it. You'll love it. But yeah, after this loud bit, when they do another quiet bit, Rick Wright does the coolest Hammond organ thing, where you hear how he's kind of going. He does that more and more every time it comes around, and the one coming up is the one where he's just like, and it's just amazing. It's like one of the high points of my music listening fandom. And it's kind of like this. I swear I'm going to have to do it in such a way where I can pipe it directly into the stream. But for now, over the speakers. So listen to that organ. Summoning his cosmic powers and glowing slightly from his toes. This is actually on the subject of Doctor Strange. It's a comic book song before comic book movies existed, and yes, the same Doctor Strange. That's how old that goes back. And yeah. So when we're talking about the red consoles, I do not have Beatles records tracked down here yet, but I do have Saucerful, and Saucerful was from the same place, and this, to me, this is exactly the same rig that did, for instance, Revolver, the White Album, and so on. This is the other side. This is literally the song Saucerful of Secrets, which is just a big noise fest. So you got noises like that, and noises like this. There is Nick's drums, and you're probably hearing the Abbey Road plate reverbs. A bunch of random clonking on a piano. First, Dave Gilmour on guitar. At this time, he's trying to imitate Syd Barrett really hard. Ooh, bass. So we're going into a sort of subsonic rumble, and this is the part where Saucerful of Secrets goes into a sort of thundery section, and this is the bass that you could get off of the red console. Probably a timpani. Switching over to a nicer organ solo. By the way, this song is also done on the Pink Floyd album, the Pink Floyd movie, Live at Pompeii. And if you like any of the things you've been hearing, you should go and get Live at Pompeii, because it is amazing, and it's all this stuff. Here's a song that you don't always hear from Pink Floyd. Seesaw. And yeah, this is Pink Floyd. This is a completely different world of Pink Floyd from what you're familiar with. And there's Sid. But yeah, so that's what I've got for the Rad console. And then the Trident A range, people always talk about, for instance, Neve. And you go on about that. And it's like, okay, so fat. And you've got Yes recorded on Neve. And it absolutely sounds way fatter than what you get off of streaming services. I mean, I demonstrated a little bit of that with a long distance runaround off of this very album. And this is obviously more fat and warm than what you get these days. But that's not to say that Neves are the fattest and warmest consoles. There's a particular kind of sound that comes off of that, which is not so far off from the Helios. And I don't have anything off of Helios except for I'll give you a brief little burst of something I can't play more. That's the Eagles. So obviously I can't play more than half a second of it. But that's a Helios. That was off of Basing Street Studios, Island Studios, and Helios is also the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin console. I think you don't really get to play that much off of Zap either, but I do have it. I will be able to refer to it. I'm going to be studying it, and I'm very interested in getting a Helios sound going. But then you've also got famous standards like this. Little Spirit of Radio for you. Everybody knows you can play that on YouTube. And you know, this is not Neve. This is Trident A range. And it's a very different sound from what they were doing in, say, Signals. Although I'm pretty sure that Moving Pictures is also off of an A range. Maybe not. I'm not absolutely certain. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that came off of Trident A ranges. And it's a really, like, just hearing that, you can hear how that's kind of more modern day friendly than what the real Neve sounded like or what the real Red console sounded like. And yet it still has that thing going on where it has the warmth. It has the, like, here's another one. People usually get to play these. Tom Petty. And there's another one where if I played it to you off of the streaming service, it would sound incredibly modern and all of the highs would be ripping your head off. And there's another thing you can hear in this as well. This song was rescued, and I'm sorry for the fact that it's crackly. It doesn't bother me so much, but this song was rescued by, I think, Jim Keltner showing up with percussion, because it's a big hit song, but they couldn't get the groove of it to sit right. And part of that is because the drummer for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, he's this funky guy. He has a kind of slow backbeat going on and just a really wobbly time. This guy had a very human sounding time where it's just flopping around in this very relaxed fashion, and that's part of what made the sound of that band what it was, so they couldn't actually replace them. I mean, the closest they could get to replacing him was Dave Grohl played with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and he was able to sound not terrible, but they couldn't just, get a drum machine or a studio guy. And so Jim Keltner showed up, and he had an egg shaker. I think I have one. Just a second, I know it's kicking around. Here we go. So, a little bit of an object lesson. This is the instrument that you could say saved, but at least enormously helped that song. He showed up and he was like, yeah, here's what you need. The song is fine, but the drum's like, and you need to have this double time thing. And they had Jim Keltner. I'm not doing it, and it takes me a little while to settle into a groove properly. And it's also very loud on the microphone. I apologize for that. But doing that, but better. And you can plainly hear it on the track. Like when I play it again, listen for that egg shaker that Jim Keltner is playing, because they've got it up quite loud, but you don't hear it as such because it's a classic record, so it's not hyping the highs as much, but it's still very obviously there. More great stuff, but that's another A range. That's not a Neve. It's not an API. It's not a EMI studio or an MCI console or something like that. That is a range. Trident had a thing going on with those. There were only 13 of these, and so getting the sounds of these, for instance, here is a little station to station. Word on the wing. And that's the thing is, with these A ranges, you could set high frequencies into the sound of a classic record without screwing it up. It sits in that upper highs where you could put it right forward, but without making it like all fake and stuff. It still feels like it's a couple of feet away. And what you're hearing there is hi-hat. Mel, I'm not sure what you're saying will be a... No, if I'm doing stuff based on any of these, it's strictly console system, which includes EQ strip. It's all got to work together. Because the thing is, you have to have those, just listen to this, right? Here is... little stay there. Listen to the way that bass hits. Listen to the way those highs hit. And how far back the guitar is. You have to be able to balance that kind of stuff while EQing it and running it through the system so that it forms into that sound. The entire system has to be set up to let you do that. And then you have to learn how to do it so that you're not, for instance, going, okay, this is great, now let's turn the hat up by 36 dB. As you listen to it, there's the hat. If you listen for it, you can hear it. But listen to how little it gets in the way of the lows and the mids. These lows are swinging. This is like full-on disco lows. You get used to it really easily. But there is no way to do a balance like that when you also need to have the highs as loud as everything else. You have to set the frequencies back to where they're supposed to set. I mean, we're hearing this off of NS10s. This is not shy about showing highs if they are there in the right place. And, you know, more examples. Here's a cute one. Bet you didn't know that this was a trident A range. You can hear those cymbals, right? You can hear the cymbals, you can hear the sibilance on the voice, you can hear all of those things, but none of them are extracted out and pasted onto the sound like they're separate elements. The cymbals feel like an object. They feel like part of a drum kit sitting back there somewhere. The air off of them goes up and out and sparkles and scintillates, but it's not coming forward. Like, this is one in which I could do another brief A-B. Like, check this out. Unchained, React, YouTube. I can probably even... Oh, it's all Righteous Brothers Unchained Melody. But that's not all, because I know I'm going to find Van Halen if I just add that to the search. And if I can, I will find somebody who I like. But failing that, I will just... Oh yeah, Jamal's okay. I'll use Jamal.
That right there.
Although I got no, let's use Andy and Alex because they're doing it off of the album. Heard that intro many times. Oh, I know I think Hunky Dory might be Trident A range, but I'm not absolutely sure because, you know, there was Trident A range is real specific. There was other stuff in that studio around that time. Yeah, I have actually thought, Mel, of going out and getting just the modern version of the Trident A range EQ simply to have something that's like a Pultec style EQ to physically mess around with. That said, remember that what I do as I do it, I have to get the sound of the plugins operating correctly, so it's a bit of a moot point whether I have the analog hardware to study and pay attention to. If I can get the sounds right, it's not necessarily through modeling the exact circuit parts. Anyways, here is the distinction between, let's see, back to that intro. So here is what it sounds like listening to this off of Spotify.
Oh, that bass.
It's Alex.
So fast.
And you hear where the cymbals are at. Now, mind you, they're still getting a lot of bass in there, but when it's coming off of the, you can see the album a little bit. Look at how far down from clipping that is. we're like 6 dB down. Everything sounds different off of this. And the thing about it is, you're not losing from having the high frequencies not super upfront and radio-like. This is coming off more like a band. They were a band. You could go into a room and they played with big old amps and loud drums and beat the crap out of the drums and had, David Lee Roth screaming through a microphone in a PA system. They sounded like a band, a loud rock band in a room. When you're doing this, very radio, right? And yeah, he's right. Wow. It's definitely a wow. But then the exact same thing off of the record, and I'm going to turn it up like 2 dB, knowing that it is that much quieter. The exact same thing off of the original record, and this is not like a 1960s record or anything, like this is late 70s, mixed on an A range, and mixed and set up in such a way where everything is not pushed forwards to sound like a radio. Off of the old vinyl and the record, it sounds like a band, and the same thing goes like this. It's just bigger. What's not to like? Unless you're a modern remixer who feels like everything has to be like coming off of a radio, and you have to have all the little twinkly details of the cymbals and everything literally in your face, stuffed up your nose and stuffed into your ears. And then you lose the size. You lose the scope of, this is a band. Van Halen was a Sunset Strip band that dominated and ruled over the other bands. They sound big. They sound powerful. There's other tracks like that. Oh, this one's fun. Center swing. And the famous Eddie Van Halen guitar tone, too. Like, people talk about the Brown sound. And it's like, oh yeah, what's the deal with this sound? That's Eddie and his Marshall stack, and what things he did. Did he use a Variac? I have a Variac because I found out about it from this guy and learned that you could take the tube amplifier and turn the voltage down a little bit and you get what you call the Brown sound. Well, what that is, you will hear it. It is a super saturated humbucker guitar into a Marshall, but rather than be like scrapey, rather than be this bright high frequency thing, although he went closer and closer to that. By the time they're doing 1984, there's a real lot of top end going on, but this is fair warning, this is just before 1984. Where's the scrape? Where's the treble on those guitars? It's a Brown sound, it's bigger. See if I can find more. Better still, let's turn it up even louder and show his intro. So this is what Eddie Van Halen's Brown sound sounds like. Great stuff. Great stuff. I mean, but think about it. I started off this live stream going on about my cards and things, and like, oh, I'm going to do this thing where you can do 17s and count it like 5 and 5 and 5 and 2 and all that stuff. Well, all you have to do is have systems that can capture and record things. Maybe make decisions like that. For instance, that they just did that. One of David Lee Roth's geniuses is that he was able to put words to this stuff that was really quite out there. I mean, if you're looking for strange time signature things, Van Halen is loaded with them. They got away with it just fine because it sounds good. And then what you do is you're mixing and mastering and presenting it properly. To some extent, even off, like again, let me remind you of a thing. I will load up a literal police record at around the same time, because this is fair warning. So it's like 1978, something. And Synchronicity is like 1979, but it was a SSL and digital. So even coming off of a vinyl record, you could present the highs differently. This is one way to present the highs. And that sounds really big. And this is a way of presenting highs. Sibilance, the symbols and things. It's just closer to the modern age, even off of vinyl. And again, that's not to say that this is bad, because it's fine. It's its own sound. There's a lot of stuff like, for instance, Synchronicity 2 sounds fantastic this way. You know, and interesting side note, you've got these volume spikes in there. Hear that bass? I'll play it again. That's because digital can hang on to really high dynamic ranges if you ask it to. You can't really see it super well, but what I'm showing here is those drum hits, and those drum hits are way, way louder than everything else. And early digital helped them do that. They helped them do this bit. That thump in there takes up a lot of space. It takes up so much space that the rest of the music can't be nearly as loud as all of that. This is like everything rocking away at once, and everything is like 12 dB down from peak. It's that much quieter than the loudest peaks. And again, this is an example of brightness. Vinyl could handle this brightness. And with this, they're doing it. Also another example of early digital being taken to the limit by Stuart Copeland's drumming. The punch of his kick drums here is taking up all the dynamic space, and they're allowing it to take up all the dynamic space. And he just cranks it, like that bit where boom goes in. Listen to how the kick drum comes in. And I'll try not to flail while doing it. that's kick and bass coming in really, really aggressively. And it's being handled by Early Digital. Early Digital with this sort of chimey little flat sound. You can hear it. It sounds like modern DAWs. It sounds like this is the modern age. But it's modern age from back in the day. And the vinyl records could present that, but the vinyl records could also present this. I hasten to add, you're hearing a digital capture of that. When I say the analog could do this, and I play you something like I say, listen to that analog. And I say, listen to how hard that analog hits. You're listening to 2496. That's captured in 24. I swear by 96K, man, I tell you. You're listening to a capture in 2496. It's not been messed with very much, but it has been normalized to the loudest volume. In fact, what I would do is capture everything, take out some of the pops manually. If there's a skip, I skip over the skip. And then I go through like this and go, let's see, I think it's Command P, is it? Or was it T? There's a technique that I'm using. Yeah. I do this. Command P, and it goes and selects the hottest peak, which for fair warning is this in the middle of this one. And I've made it as big as I can. And that is the hottest peak of the whole record at this time. And what I'll do is I will go in and select that peak and then do a gain change and take just that peak down by half a dB. Having done that, I will go and search for the next hottest peak. And I'll do that for a number of times until I'm satisfied. Because what you're hearing, even though it is not as loud as the modern Loudness War version, has had the literal, really hottest peaks of the album taken down by maybe a dB or a dB and a half. No compression, just going after the peak all by itself and taking only the snippet of the top off of the peak. And that's how I get most of it being like, for instance, here's where that loudest hit was. It's this groove. It's this drum and bass groove. But you've also got louder stuff like this. Unchanged. And just having done that, there's a snare drum. That's a very own 80s snare drum. It's very open, but there's a lot of point on it. This is what you get off of it's what you get off of a normal recording rather than heavily processing it. Like, that pop is what comes off of the mic. To just use the Trident Day range, which is what Fair Warning was also making. And they're able to sit it into a place where it sounds like a modern studio recording. Oh, here's some craziness. This is just fooling around with a synthesizer into the Marshall stack. And that's probably Eddie playing the drums. He's probably playing everything. Remember, you can run things into amps. got it on the album. Because I guess, okay. I'll get out of the door. That's all digital. That's coming off of my computer. That's $24.96. It's the same that I put out for, like, I'm not making sounds like that, but I'm putting stuff out on Bandcamp at $24.96, and so can you, and so can anybody. And nothing is stopping you from being able to make sounds like this or any more Trident Day range. How about? Bet you didn't know this was Trident Day range. Here is a Devo album that I like. Blockhead. This is also Trident Day range. I'm not sure there was a hit that came off this album. Nice groove on this one though. And an odd time signature, of course. And Devo. See, I told you it was Devo. This just proves it was Devo. So you can do this as well. And again, this is off of the Duty Now for the Future album. It was mixed. Old digital synthesizers. And it mixed on Trident Day range, but it's just a recording. It's just music that was recorded. I mean, like, yeah, you can do this. We have the technology, we have samples, we have the ability to record stuff. We have all manner of things. And if I can make plugins where you can mix stuff and it sounds more like a Trident Day range, you can have an easier time getting to those sounds. But all you have to do is get to these sounds and be able to mix them in the box with this kind of output, and this is literally digital. We're hearing digital. You don't have to actually distribute an analog or make vinyl records or literally work with expensive analog tape to do these things. Let's clock out. Devo is really kind of awesome, actually. Devo. Yeah, you can do all of these things. Everything that I am showing you, whether it be anything, something as old as Saucerful, and we'll let Saucerful load up. We can have something as old as this. Saucerful of Secrets done off of a red tube console. Not many tracks here. But if you can capture the tracks into digital and handle them the way that the sounds were made, so that the guts of it are retained, kind of like what I do with Console Zero, and then mix them in such a way that it's applying sort of these tonalities to it, or even close, then it's like you can do this. It's possible to do on a laptop. All of this is achievable because what we're hearing is off 2496 digital. Floyd. Literal Clegg had a wooden leg. Yeah. And that's what's kind of exciting, is because this is a direction that's possible to go. And a lot of this, like, you don't really need to have much fear of like AI art generation getting in the way of this, because a lot of it is just choosing to do stuff. And also the way of expressing sounds like these. Like, I'm sorry, AI is just not really great at synthesizing these noises directly. It could synthesize the noises and then mix them if it was doing it really well. But like, you feed it this stuff and then what it spits out doesn't really have the sonority and sounds like an MP3. And you're not necessarily going to get it making these choices. Part of what we hear off of something like this, which is Saucer Full of Secrets off of the same album by Pink Floyd, the end section of it, that's a Hammond organ and the organ pedals. And he decided to make the bass sit that loud. That's what the bass of a organ pedals sounds like. I've owned one. I don't anymore, sadly. But back in the day, once I owned a, I think it was a Lowry organ with pedals, and that's what the organ pedals sound like in the room off of the speaker of the organ. You just have to record it and not screw it up. That's all. And on that note, it's past 1 o'clock. I'm going to get back to actual work and sort of chill out for a while, but it's been fun doing this like pep talk for digital music making. 'Cause yeah, digital 2496. I captured it off of a record, but you could still do this. And I'll talk to you later.